Hey, what's ready? Welcome back to News Dose, and breaking news dropped this morning. We very well might be on the way for yet another mega acquisition that does impact video games. This includes some of the most beloved franchises of all time, such as Batman, Mortal Kombat, and even Harry Potter. That's quite literally one of the biggest franchises in the world. So yes, this is beyond significant, and at the bare minimum, we already have confirmation by Warner Brothers themselves that a sell-off is on the table. But I think the biggest question right now is who is actually willing to pony up the dough. And I think that's where things start to get a little bit dicey. So make sure to stick around, and we're going to get into all of that, as well as more evidence that Sony is in fact preparing for their own handheld console, a PSP3, if you will. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go and get right into things, though, starting off with Ninja Gaiden 4. It launched today, and reviews are currently rolling out, and as of this recording, it sits at an 82 overall score on Metacritic with a total of 58 reviews. This puts it right in line with Ninja Gaiden 2, which received an 81 back in the day, and I'd say that's a pretty good sign, all things considered. Now, critics have been fairly consistent across the board, though. On one side, its combat has been praised, and it's being described as one of the better action games that you can pick up, which, a Team Ninja Platinum Games collaboration, it definitely has the pedigree for that, to say the least. But however, its story has received some complaints. It's described as a bit forgettable, which is also to be expected, and I've also heard that the exploration leaves something to be desired, but all in all, it's an excellent looking game with thrilling action. I've also heard that it does offer some challenge, which I think fans of the franchise are probably going to be relieved to hear that, and that's kind of the thing for me. Everything that I've heard about Ninja Gaiden 4 fits right in line with what Ninja Gaiden fans want, and considering this is the first big mainline title in a very, very long time, yeah, I'd say all of this is a really good sign. So hopefully all of you fans out there will enjoy Ninja Gaiden 4. And for myself, I'm going to jump in sometime soon as well. Now, that's not the only notable game that received reviews today, though, because Persona 3 Reload is also dropping for the Switch 2 later this week. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the same good news in this case, because Persona 3 Reload currently sits at a 79 overall score, which that in itself isn't terrible, but it is still significantly lower than it is on other platforms. As one such example, it has an 87 on the PlayStation 5, and unfortunately, there is a reason for this large difference. It's because the Switch 2 version isn't well optimized. Its frame pacing has been described as unfortunately inconsistent, and even its load times have been criticized. And honestly, the Switch 2 should not be struggling with this game, and that's kind of the thing, because Atlus themselves seemingly admitted that they rushed the launch for Persona 3 Reload. In an interview, they said that they wanted to release Persona 3 Reload for the Switch 2 as early as possible, and then during the same interview, they were asked about it only having a 30 FPS option, in which they responded by saying, "We are currently taking steps to improve this. Since careful QA is required, it was difficult to address this in time for the main game's release, but will be in future patches." So the way I view this statement is that they knew about these problems and they simply rushed it out to launch because, in their own words, they wanted to release it as early as possible. So they're kind of taking the fix-it-later approach, which I think is a very poor move. It was already bad enough that they went with a game keycard. Fans are not happy about that, but now it's also a poorly optimized game at launch as well. Now, we can partially blame Nintendo just because, they've not exactly done a great job for a lot of these third-party companies, but at the same time, these third-party publishers, they still need to produce high-quality content that is befitting of the Switch 2, and this seemingly just isn't it. Now, hopefully, this won't become a trend for future Atlus games, but if anything, it does sound like they're working to improve Persona 3 Reload. Oh, and speaking of Nintendo, they actually have another direct plan for October, or at least technically. This isn't a big general direct or even a partner showcase for that matter, but rather it's another 1-hour showcase dedicated to Sakurai and his newest game being Kirby Air Riders. Now, I have no idea how he's going to make another 1-hour showcase for Kirby Air Riders interesting. I mean, it's a kart racing type of game, and how much is there really to explain for this type of game? But I mean, this is Sakurai for you. He goes pretty in-depth with his game reveals, and we've seen that over the years for Smash Brothers, and I think in this case, Nintendo is just kind of embracing that. I think they're just kind of like, yeah, Sakurai's been awesome for us. He's definitely one of our best creators, so let's just let him do what he wants to. And in this case, I guess that means he needs a second direct for Kirby Air Riders that's apparently an hour long. That's pretty crazy, but who knows? Maybe he'll have a big surprise in store for fans. Now, if you are interested, though, it will take place on October 23rd at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Okay, now let's just go and talk about this Warner Brothers acquisition, because this has the potential to really shake up the game industry in a pretty significant way, depending on how things play out. I mean, you have to remember that they own franchises like Mortal Kombat, Batman, Game of Thrones, and even Harry Potter, which quite literally produced one of the most successful games this generation, being, of course, Hogwarts Legacy. Now, they also have the upcoming Lego Batman game, which actually looks very promising. And then there's also the long-running Arkham series, which are beloved among gaming fans. So they have a fairly large footprint within the gaming space. And ever since they announced their separation with Discovery, there has been speculation about a potential buyout, whether that's in sweeping fashion or maybe just for specific franchises and studios. And well, at the very least this morning, they confirmed that multiple different companies have made offers to acquire Warner Brothers or even the entire company. They said that we took the bold step of preparing to separate the company into two distinct leading media companies, Warner Brothers and Discovery Global, because we strongly believed that this was the best path forward. It's no surprise that the significant value of our portfolio is receiving increased recognition by others in the market. After receiving interest from multiple parties, we've initiated a comprehensive review of strategic alternatives to identify the best path forward to unlock the full value of our assets. And that's one of the very important things to understand about an acquisition like this. This involves a very diverse entertainment portfolio that isn't just popular within the gaming space. They have things like HBO Max and Game of Thrones. So this could draw a lot of attention from companies that aren't typically known for, hardcore gaming. There's Netflix, there's Apple, Amazon, etc., etc. So there's no guarantee that a gaming company will be one of those bidders. But I will say that if somebody does, the companies that comes to mind are obviously Microsoft and Sony, and there's also companies like Tencent and even PIF, which is currently acquiring EA. Now, because PIF is acquiring EA, I can't imagine that they'd also make a bid for Warner Brothers. So I will say that. But one interesting outcome is that Warner Brothers could technically sell off separate businesses. So in other words, they could potentially sell off their gaming studios as a separate entity. But the thing about that is that the only way I could see that working out is if they include the franchises that they work on. I mean, at the end of the day, IP is king, and that's what companies truly care about. NetherRealm Studios, as one such example, while yes, they've worked on some great games in the past, and they could be utilized on maybe some different fighting game franchises, but they, however, aren't going to draw a ton of attention unless they're sold alongside the Mortal Kombat IP as well. And the same applies to their other game studios. Now, as for Sony and Microsoft, though, I know those are the two potential buyers that every gamer are going to look at as potential homes for Warner Brothers. But what I'm going to say about them is that, for one, I don't know if Microsoft will be able to entertain a sweeping acquisition for Warner Brothers just because of Activision Blizzard and all of the hoops that they had to jump through to get that through regulations. So even though they're definitely in a position for another mega acquisition, it could still be a little too soon for another big buyout like this. Now, they could still, however, target specific IP and studios, so we'll have to see how that shapes out. Now, as for Sony, for them, it's, I'd say, more about the capital and how much they're willing to pay. You know, they're not quite as big as some of these other tech companies that I just mentioned, so things could get difficult for Sony. But I do know for a fact that they recently said that they do want to buy IP. That is a part of their long-term strategy, so just like Microsoft, they could target specific IP franchises and studios. I mean, we'll see what happens with this. This is breaking news. We're going to probably learn a lot more about this in the coming weeks, but this is definitely huge news, and the impact could be pretty massive depending on what happens next. All right, now one more thing before we go, though, because this is absolutely fascinating. A few PlayStation 5 games, including Demon's Souls, recently got patched to include Sony's new PS5 power saving mode. And yeah, we've known about this new mode for quite some time. Sony announced it earlier in the year, but now we're seeing more of the specifics. And check this out. Not only can you enable power saving by a per-game basis, but also with it enabled, Demon's Souls runs at a lower resolution and at a lower frame rate. Reportedly, it runs at just 30 FPS as opposed to its usual 60 frames per second. And that's the thing. Because who in the world is going to willingly play these subpar experiences on their PlayStation 5 that they paid a lot of money for, unless there's a hidden reason behind this new option? And that's what's currently being theorized. The idea is that they're implementing this to prepare for their widely rumored handheld. If this new handheld of theirs is to run PlayStation 5 games natively, as has been rumored, well, then they would have to find a way to make those games actually work on a handheld that's likely quite a bit less powerful. I mean, look at PC gaming handhelds. Yes, they can run AAA games, but that often comes with some sacrifice. And I would think the same thing would apply to whatever this PlayStation handheld turns out to be. So if that's the case, that's where this power saver mode starts to make sense. And I hope all of this is true, because I think it would be pretty amazing to have a native PlayStation handheld once again. I mean, of course, there's the Portal, but, you know, that's not really the same thing as running games natively. My only thing, though, is that I do wonder what price Sony is targeting for their alleged handheld. I mean, handheld technology is still quite expensive, and in order to play PlayStation 5 games, even at a lower resolution and frame rate, that could still require a lot of power. So I do wonder about the price that they're targeting. I mean, could we see another, Xbox ROG Ally situation, or are they going to try to be a little bit more approachable? But yeah, I think this is more evidence that they are preparing for a PSP 3, if you will. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode. But until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.